Therapy culture is lying to you. I said it. The mental health industrial complex, the Instagram therapists, the TikTok psychologists, the self-help gurus, the wellness influencers, they're feeding you narratives that sound good, feel good, get likes and shares, and are keeping you absolutely stuck. You need to heal your inner child. Everything is a trauma response. Your boundaries are never the problem. Self-care means saying no to anything uncomfortable. You need to cut off anyone who doesn't serve your highest good. These messages are everywhere. They're the gospel of modern mental health. They sound empowering. They sound compassionate. They sound progressive, and they're making you worse. I'm sure today I'm calling out 5 mental health myths that have taken over therapy culture. Myths that sound good in a carousel post but are actually preventing you from real growth. If you're serious about your mental health, if you're serious about actually growing and not just performing growth on social media, you need to hear this. Let's get into it. Myth number 1. Everything is a trauma response. This is the biggest myth destroying mental health discourse right now. Someone cuts you off in traffic? Trauma response. You procrastinate on a project? Trauma response. You got anxious before a presentation? Trauma response. You forgot to text your friend back? Trauma response. You ate an entire pizza by yourself? Trauma response. No, stop. Not everything is trauma. And calling everything trauma actually minimizes real trauma and prevents you from taking responsibility for your choices and behaviors. Let me be very clear. Trauma is real. Trauma is serious. Trauma rewires your brain and nervous system in documented, measurable ways. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a clinical diagnosis with specific criteria. Complex trauma from chronic childhood adversity has devastating impacts that require professional treatment. I'm not minimizing that. I'm saying not every uncomfortable feeling, not every bad habit, not every mistake you make is a trauma response. Sometimes you're just anxious because you're unprepared, procrastinating because you lack discipline, people-pleasing because you want to be liked, avoiding conflict because you're uncomfortable with confrontation, eating your feelings because you never learned other coping skills. And here's the controversial part. Calling those things trauma responses actually disempowers you. Because if everything is trauma, then you're forever a victim of your past. You're not responsible. You can't change. You're just triggered by life. That's not healing. That's learned helplessness with therapy language. The research is clear on this. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who literally wrote the book on trauma, The Body Keeps the Score, distinguishes between capital T trauma, life-threatening events, chronic abuse, severe neglect, violence, things that fundamentally alter your nervous system and sense of safety. Lowercase t trauma, painful experiences that are difficult but don't meet the clinical threshold for trauma. Heartbreak, failure, disappointment, conflict, normal life challenges. Both are hard. Both deserve compassion. But they're not the same thing. And when therapy culture tells you that your procrastination is a trauma response, what they're really saying is, you don't need to develop discipline or accountability. Your past absolves you. That's not empowering. That's infantilizing. Here's what you need to hear. You can acknowledge that your past was hard and take responsibility for your present choices. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can say, I grew up in a chaotic household that made me anxious about uncertainty. And I'm an adult now who can develop strategies to manage that anxiety and make better choices. That's integration. That's growth. That's actual healing. The alternative? Staying stuck, calling everything a trauma response, and never developing agency over your life. Research from cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and basically every evidence-based therapeutic modality shows. Awareness of past patterns is step 1. Taking action to change those patterns is step 2. Therapy culture has gotten obsessed with step one and forgotten step two exists. So here's my challenge. For the next week, catch yourself every time you want to say trauma response. Ask instead, is this actually trauma, or is this a habit, a pattern, or a choice I have the power to change? That's not invalidating your pain. That's reclaiming your power. If this is hitting home, pause right now and hit that like button. Let me know you're ready to stop using trauma language to avoid responsibility. Myth number two. Healing means cutting off everyone who doesn't serve your highest good. Oh, this one. This toxic myth has destroyed more relationships than I can count. Cut off anyone who doesn't serve your highest good. Your vibe attracts your tribe. Remove the low vibration people. If they're not growing, let them go. You can't heal in the same environment that made you sick. Sounds empowering, right? Sounds like boundaries. Sounds like self-care. What it actually is, permission to avoid accountability, blow up relationships when they get hard, and never learn conflict resolution skills. Let me say something controversial. Not everyone who challenges you is toxic. Not everyone who disagrees with you is bad for your mental health. Not every uncomfortable relationship needs to be ended. In fact, some of the most important growth happens in relationships with people who don't fully get you, people who challenge your perspective, people who hold you accountable when you're wrong. The research on this is undeniable. Dr. John Gottman's decades of relationship research shows that healthy relationships aren't conflict-free. They're characterized by the ability to repair after conflict. The people who build lasting, meaningful relationships aren't the ones who cut and run at the first sign of difficulty. They're the ones who learn to communicate through discomfort. Now, and this is important, I'm not saying stay in abusive relationships. I'm not saying tolerate mistreatment. I'm not saying sacrifice your well-being for others. Real abuse, physical, emotional, financial control, systematic degradation requires you to leave, full stop. But therapy culture has expanded toxic to include anyone who disagrees with you, calls you out when you're wrong, has different political views, doesn't validate every feeling you have, expects you to show up and be reliable, challenges you to grow, and that's a problem. Because here's the truth, growth is uncomfortable, accountability is uncomfortable. Being told you hurt someone, even unintentionally, is uncomfortable. If you cut off everyone who makes you uncomfortable, you're not protecting your peace. You're creating an echo chamber where you never have to face yourself. I see this constantly. Parents who made mistakes but genuinely love you? Cut off. Friends who gently called out harmful behavior? Cut off. Partners who need you to work on your issues? Cut off. Colleagues who expect professional accountability? Toxic workplace, I quit. At a certain point, if everyone in your life is toxic, maybe you need to look in the mirror. I know that's harsh, but someone needs to say it. Because the pattern I see over and over is people cut off their entire support system in the name of boundaries, then wonder why they feel isolated and alone. Here's what actual healthy boundaries look like. I love you, and I need us to communicate more respectfully. This relationship matters to me, and I need you to work on this issue with me. I can't be around you when you're drinking, but I'd love to spend time together when you're sober. Our political views differ, and I need us to avoid that topic so we can maintain our relationship. See the difference? Healthy boundaries maintain relationship while protecting well-being. They communicate needs clearly. They invite the other person to grow with you. Therapy culture boundaries, they just end relationships. And here's the kicker. Research on loneliness shows we're in a social connection crisis. People are more isolated than ever. Mental health is declining partly because we've lost community, and therapy culture's response is cut more people off, protect your energy, only surround yourself with people who make you feel good. That's not mental health. That's narcissism dressed up in wellness language. Real mental health includes tolerating some discomfort in relationships, repairing when you've caused harm, staying connected even when it's hard, building community across difference, learning that not everyone has to agree with or validate you. So before you cut someone off, ask yourself, are they actually harming me, or am I avoiding discomfort? Have I clearly communicated my needs, or am I expecting them to read my mind? Am I willing to do repair work, or do I just want to be right? Is this a pattern? Do I cut people off repeatedly? What am I losing by ending this relationship? Sometimes the answer is still, yes, I need to end this, and that's valid. But make it a conscious choice, not a therapy culture approved impulse. Myth number 3. Self-care means doing whatever feels good. I'm about to lose followers for this one. I don't care. Self-care is not bubble baths and face masks. Self-care is not treating yourself. Self-care is not buying things to make yourself feel better. That's not self-care. That's consumption. That's avoidance. That's capitalism selling you the idea that wellness comes in a package. Real self-care? Real self-care is often uncomfortable. Real self-care is going to bed at a reasonable time when you want to scroll, eating vegetables when you want French fries, exercising when you want to stay in bed, having the hard conversation instead of avoiding it, setting boundaries even though it feels mean, saying no when you want to, people please, going to therapy even when you don't feel like it, doing your physical therapy exercises when they hurt, taking your medication even when you feel fine, breaking up with someone you love but who isn't right for you. See the pattern? Real self-care often requires discipline, not indulgence. Therapy culture has convinced you that self-care means avoiding anything uncomfortable, that you should honor your feelings by doing whatever you want in the moment. That's not self-care, that's impulsivity, and it's keeping you stuck. The famous marshmallow test and follow-up studies show that self-control in childhood predicts outcomes decades later. Adults who develop discipline and self-regulation have lower rates of depression and anxiety. But therapy culture tells you, honor your feelings. If you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. Rest is resistance. No, sometimes rest is just avoidance. Sometimes I'm not feeling it today is legitimate self-care. And sometimes it's a cop-out that's preventing you from building the life you actually want. I'm not saying ignore your needs. I'm not saying push through everything. I'm saying develop the wisdom to know the difference between genuine need for rest. Your body or mind is genuinely depleted and needs recovery. Avoidance disguised as self-care. You're uncomfortable and want to escape rather than face something hard. Example, genuine rest. I've been working 60-hour weeks. I'm exhausted. I need a day to recover. Avoidance. I have a difficult conversation coming up and I'm anxious, so I'm going to call it self-care and binge Netflix instead of preparing. See the difference? One is listening to your body's actual needs. The other is numbing yourself to avoid growth. And here's the thing, nobody can tell you which one it is except you. You have to develop honest self-awareness. But therapy culture's message, do whatever feels good and call it self-care, prevents that self-awareness from developing. Because if everything that feels good is self-care, you never have to examine whether you're avoiding responsibility, numbing pain, or preventing growth. Real self-care sometimes means waking up early to exercise even though your bed is comfortable, meal prepping even though ordering food is easier, having a budget even though spending feels good, addressing conflict even though avoidance feels safer, going to the dentist even though it's scary, ending a toxic pattern even though it's familiar, starting therapy even though it's expensive and vulnerable. These things don't spark joy in the moment. They're hard, they require effort. But 6 months from now, a year from now, you'll be grateful you did them. That's actual self-care. That's caring about your future self, not just your current self. So the next time someone tells you self-care means doing whatever feels good, Ask yourself, is this serving my immediate comfort or my long-term well-being? Because those aren't always the same thing. If you're realizing that you've been avoiding responsibility in the name of self-care, drop a comment below. Let's normalize honest self-awareness. 4. You have to heal your inner child before you can move forward. Inner child work is trendy right now. Everyone's reparenting themselves. Everyone's writing letters to their younger selves. Everyone's doing inner child meditations. And look, inner child work can be valuable. I'm not saying it's worthless. What I am saying is, therapy culture has turned it into a requirement, an excuse, a way to stay stuck. I can't be in a relationship until I heal my inner child. I can't set boundaries because my inner child is wounded. I can't take this opportunity because my inner child is scared. I can't handle criticism because it triggers my inner child. Your inner child has become a get-out-of-jail-free card for adult responsibility. Here's the truth. You don't have to completely heal your past before you can build your future. You don't have to resolve every childhood wound before you can have healthy relationships. You don't have to fix your inner child before you can show up as a functional adult. In fact, waiting until you're fully healed before taking action ensures you'll never take action. Because healing isn't a destination, it's a process. It's ongoing. It never ends. The research on post-traumatic growth shows something powerful. People often heal through action, not before action. You heal through building healthy relationships, not by waiting until you're healed to start one. You develop confidence through facing fears, not by waiting until fear is gone to act. You build resilience through challenge, not by avoiding challenge until you feel ready. Therapy culture has it backwards. They say, heal first, then live. Reality says, live while healing, heal through living. Let me give you an example. Therapy culture says, I have abandonment issues from my childhood. I need to fully process and heal those before I can date anyone. I'm going to spend years in therapy working on my inner child, and then I'll be ready for a relationship. Reality says, I have abandonment issues from my childhood. I'm going to work on those in therapy, and I'm going to practice building secure attachment in real relationships. I'll learn and heal through experience with professional support. See the difference? One keeps you in preparation mode forever. The other integrates healing with living. Now, I'm not saying jump into relationships if you're genuinely not ready. I'm not saying ignore your inner work. I'm saying your inner child doesn't need to be perfectly healed for you to function as an adult. Those things can happen simultaneously. And honestly, your inner child probably needs you to show up as a reliable adult more than it needs you to spend hours journaling about childhood wounds. What does your inner child actually need? You, as the adult, making good decisions. You building a stable life. You keeping commitments. You setting boundaries. You taking care of your body. You building healthy relationships. You showing up when things are hard, that's reparenting. Not writing letters, not visualization meditations. Actual adult behavior that creates safety and stability. Your inner child doesn't need more therapy language. It needs you to be a responsible adult. I know that's not as Instagrammable as healing your inner child through self-love practices, but it's true. And here's the other issue with the inner child obsession. It can become a way to avoid responsibility for your adult behavior. I yelled at my partner because my inner child was triggered. I quit my job impulsively because my inner child needs to feel free. I can't handle feedback because it hurts my inner child. No, you're an adult. You have adult responsibilities. You can acknowledge your wounds and manage your behavior. You can say, I have wounds from childhood that make this hard, and I'm responsible for how I show up in this relationship/job/situation. Both things are true. Therapy culture wants you to choose. Either you're wounded and not responsible, or you're strong and need to just get over it. Actual maturity is, I'm wounded and responsible. Both, simultaneously. So here's my challenge. For the next month, every time you want to say my inner child, ask instead, what does adult me need to do right now? Sometimes the answer is tend to my pain, be gentle with myself, acknowledge the wound. But sometimes the answer is make the hard choice, do the uncomfortable thing, show up even when it's scary, be the adult I needed when I was a child. Your inner child doesn't need rescue. It needs you to be a trustworthy adult. 5. If you're still struggling, therapy isn't working. This is the myth that makes me angriest because it sets people up for failure and makes them blame themselves or their therapist when actually, therapy is supposed to be hard. Growth is supposed to be uncomfortable. Healing is supposed to feel worse before it feels better. But therapy culture, especially online therapy culture, has created this expectation. You start therapy, you feel immediately better, you do the work, you're healed, you graduate from therapy, you're fixed forever. That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. Real therapy is messy. It's bringing up stuff you've buried for years. It's feeling feelings you've avoided your entire life. It's facing truths about yourself that are uncomfortable. Of course it's hard. Of course you're struggling. That doesn't mean it's not working. It might mean it is working. But therapy culture has sold you this idea that therapy should feel good, that your therapist should validate everything you say, that you should leave every session feeling lighter. Sometimes, yes, sometimes therapy provides relief and clarity, but other times you leave therapy feeling raw, exposed, like everything got stirred up and nothing got resolved. And that's normal. That's part of the process. Research on therapeutic progress shows that healing isn't linear. You don't steadily improve week after week. You have breakthroughs and backslides, good weeks and terrible weeks, insights and confusion. And actually, some of the most important therapeutic work happens during the worse before better phase, when you're finally facing the thing you've avoided, when you're finally feeling the grief you've suppressed, when you're finally acknowledging the pattern you've denied. That's growth. It doesn't feel like it in the moment, but it is. Therapy culture has also created this idea that if you're still struggling after X months of therapy, something's wrong. I've been in therapy for 6 months and I still have anxiety. I've been in therapy for a year and I'm still depressed. I've been in therapy for 2 years and I still struggle with my relationships. Here's what nobody wants to hear. Some issues take years to work through. Some issues might be lifelong management, not one-time fixes. If you have complex post-traumatic stress disorder from childhood trauma, that's not getting resolved in 6 months. If you have deep attachment wounds, that's years of work. If you have certain personality patterns, that's ongoing growth forever. And that's okay. That doesn't mean therapy failed. That means you're human with real significant challenges that require long-term attention. We wouldn't expect someone with diabetes to take insulin for 6 months and be cured. We understand that's lifelong management. But with mental health, we expect go to therapy, get fixed, be done. That's not realistic. And that expectation is making people give up on therapy prematurely. They think, this isn't working, I'm still struggling. When actually it is working, you're still struggling because healing takes time. You're building new neural pathways, you're learning new patterns, you're facing decades of conditioning. That doesn't happen overnight. Now, I do need to say this. There are times when therapy genuinely isn't working, when you and your therapist aren't a good fit, when the therapeutic approach isn't right for your needs, when your therapist isn't competent or ethical. Science therapy might not be working, your therapist doesn't have training in your specific issues, you feel judged or shamed rather than supported, your therapist talks about themselves more than listening to you, you never feel challenged or pushed to grow, just validated constantly. Your therapist encourages dependency rather than independence. You've been doing the same thing for years with zero progress or insight. Your therapist crosses boundaries or behaves unethically. Those are valid reasons to find a new therapist. But I'm still struggling alone. That's not a sign therapy isn't working. Here's the other thing. Therapy culture has created this idea that therapy is the only answer, that everyone needs therapy, that you can't heal without it. And that's simply not true. Some people heal through supportive friendships, spiritual communities, physical practices like yoga or martial arts, creative expression, nature connection, life experience, and time self-directed learning and growth therapy is a tool, a valuable tool for many people. But it's not the only path to healing. And pushing everyone into therapy, regardless of whether they need it, want it, can afford it, or have access to quality care, is not helpful. Therapy culture has made therapy trendy. That's great in some ways, it reduces stigma, but it's also created this mandatory vibe where if you're not in therapy, you're not doing the work. That's gatekeeping healing, and it needs to stop. So here's what I want you to take away. If you're in therapy and struggling, that might be evidence it's working, not failing. If you've been in therapy for years and still have challenges, that's normal for significant issues. If therapy isn't helping despite genuine effort and time, finding a new therapist or approach is valid. And if therapy isn't your path, finding other ways to heal is completely legitimate. You don't have to apologize for still struggling. You don't have to explain why you're not fixed yet. You don't have to perform being healed. Healing is lifelong. Growth is ongoing. You're exactly where you need to be. Look, I know this episode was a lot. I know some of you are uncomfortable right now, maybe defensive, maybe angry. Good. If this made you uncomfortable, sit with that. Ask yourself why, because here's the truth. Real growth requires real accountability. Real healing requires real honesty. Real mental health requires real effort. And therapy culture, the Instagram version, the TikTok version, the performative version, is making all of that harder. It's turned therapy into aesthetics, boundaries into selfishness, self-care into indulgence, trauma into identity, healing into consumerism. And it's not serving you, it's keeping you stuck while making you feel like you're growing. That's the most dangerous part. You're using all the right language, reading all the right books, following all the right accounts, but you're not actually changing. You're not actually growing. You're just performing growth on social media. The truth is, you have more power than therapy culture wants you to believe. You're not as fragile as they tell you. You're not as broken as they suggest. You're not as powerless as they imply. You're capable of tolerating discomfort, facing hard truths, taking responsibility, doing difficult things, and building the life you want, even while wounded, even while healing, even while imperfect. But you won't do any of that if you keep believing the myths. So here's my challenge. For the next 30 days, notice when you're using therapy language to avoid responsibility, to stay stuck, to perform healing instead of actually doing it. Notice when you call something trauma that's actually just life. Notice when you cut someone off instead of having a hard conversation. Notice when you call avoidance self-care. Notice when you use your inner child as an excuse. Notice when you blame therapy for not fixing you fast enough. Just notice. Become aware. Because awareness is the first step. Action is the second step. And therapy culture has convinced you that awareness alone is enough. It's not. You can understand why you are the way you are. You can have compassion for your wounds. You can acknowledge your past. If this episode challenged you, made you think, or gave you a perspective shift, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more honest mental health content that prioritizes real growth over comfort. And share this with someone who's been stuck in performative healing. The algorithm doesn't promote uncomfortable truths, but you can. Drop a comment below with which myth hit you hardest. See you next week. See you.